The scream echoes before the impact. Within hours, Jericho is no longer a fortress. It is ruin. Dust rises in a thick cloud above the walls. Children are dragged hurriedly into houses. Doors are bolted.
Men rush up stone stairways trying to see beyond the parapets. Outside, a deep sound rolls across the valley. Trumpets, coordinated footsteps. A tense silence cuts through the scorching air. The ground trembles. A crack splits the wall that once seemed eternal. Stones loosen. One block falls. Then another. What had protected generations now bends before an invisible force.
How could a city surrounded by imposing walls collapse so suddenly in the 1200s BC?
What was unfolding there was not merely a common military assault. It was a moment that would mark the collective memory of a people and echo across millennia as a symbol of conquest, promise, and judgment. The fall of Jericho was not just the destruction of a city, it was a breaking point in the history of the ancient Near East. Jericho was one of the oldest cities in the world. Built around natural springs in the Jordan Valley, it thrived where the desert began. Its walls were not simply stacked stones. They were declarations of power. They protected storehouses, temples, homes arranged along narrow streets, bustling markets. The common narrative often portrays that era as a time of constant instability. Nomadic tribes, frequent wars, territorial disputes. But this view oversimplifies the landscape. Canaan in the 1200s. BC was a vibrant mosaic of interconnected city-states, bound together by trade, alliances, and diplomacy. Caravans crossed routes carrying copper, pottery, grain, and textiles between Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean. Local rulers exchanged correspondence, negotiated tributes, and sought protection from larger empires. Jericho was part of that system. Its strategic position near the Jordan River crossings made it a key point of movement. It was not a vast metropolis, but it was significant. Its inhabitants did not live on the brink of collapse. They lived in relative stability, sustained by irrigated agriculture, regional commerce, an established urban organization, and it was precisely this interconnectivity that made Jericho a target. While the city prospered behind its walls, a movement was forming beyond the desert. A people who had wandered for years, carrying stories of liberation and promise, advanced toward a land they believed was their destiny. They were not merely migrants. They were a group shaping a shared identity, united by a powerful narrative. The origin of Jericho's fall did not begin at its gates. It began far away. The origin of the crisis that would culminate in Jericho's fall did not begin at its gates. It began far away in the accumulated experiences of a displaced people. Experiences of oppression, crossings, covenants, and laws. A process invisible to the eyes of the Canaanites, yet decisive. In the silence of desert nights, stories were repeated around the fire. Promises were reaffirmed. The conquest was not only strategic, it was spiritual. The land was seen as inheritance, and Jericho was the first. Obstacle, the point of contact between this migrating people and the urban world of QAnon, came at the banks of the Jordan. Crossing the river symbolized more than geography. It marked the passage from nomadic existence to direct confrontation with fortified cities. Jericho became the gateway. Its inhabitants knew something was approaching. Reports of previous victories had already circulated.
Fear spread even before the first steps circled the walls.
Gates were reinforced. Watchmen doubled their vigilance. The city closed in on itself. Then came the unusual siege. For days, the invaders did not attack. They walked around the city in silence, accompanied by priests and trumpets. A ritual march, repeated, methodical, psychologically devastating. Inside the walls, tension turned into desperation.
But where can we go?
What did that silence mean?
Why did they not strike? Was it provocation? Was it waiting? Each circuit around the city eroded the defenders' confidence. On the seventh day, the ritual changed. The circuits multiplied. The sound of the trumpets became continuous. Then a collective shout shattered the air. The walls collapsed. Violence spread swiftly. House by house, street by street. Fire began consuming what remained. Storehouses were burned. Objects were looted or destroyed. The city that symbolized security became a scene of execution. Some inhabitants tried to resist. Others sought shelter. Some may have pleaded, but the momentum of conquest allowed little negotiation. Jericho was devoted to destruction. Human reaction during the siege revealed the limits of the time. The Canaanites trusted their gods, their walls, their regional alliances. They did not fully understand the kind of war they faced. A war infused with religious symbolism, where victory was not merely territorial, but theological. On the other side, the conquerors interpreted every development as confirmation of their faith. The collapse of the walls was not seen as accident. It was seen as divine intervention. That conviction intensified the radical nature of the action. When absolute beliefs meet fragile structures, moderation rarely follows. Social collapse was immediate. Local institutions vanished within hours. Authorities were eliminated. Family bonds were broken by death or dispersal. The urban memory of generations was reduced to ashes, and with collapse came the need for justification. The later narrative transformed the episode into example, a warning, a symbol that resistance to the new people would bring severe consequences. Radicalization did not end with the battle. The event solidified a worldview based on rigid separation between peoples.
And the question remained.
Jericho became the inaugural example of a broader campaign. Other cities heard what had happened. Fear began to precede the army, but devastation did not remain within the walls. In surrounding fields, harvests were abandoned. Irrigation systems failed. Shepherds avoided nearby lands. Smaller villages felt the economic impact. The fall of one city affected entire networks, the Jordan Valley. Once animated by trade and organized agriculture, entered a period of transition. The landscape changed. Where houses once stood in order, mounds of rubble remained. Slowly, nature began reclaiming space. In time, the rhythm of tragedy slowed, not because reconciliation occurred, but because the city no longer existed. The event had fulfilled its role within the broader narrative of conquest. Jericho became memory. The post-event world was not simple continuation. The conquest altered regional balance. New populations settled. Tribal structures replaced urban systems in some areas. The political dynamics of QAnon began to shift. The identity of the conquering people strengthened with this first victory. The fall of Jericho was retold as proof of destiny fulfilled. For surviving Canaanites, it marked the beginning of a new reality under foreign dominance. The episode left marks not only on land, but on minds. The idea that walls do not guarantee safety began to echo. The perception that faith and strategy can merge into devastating force became part of collective memory. And today, millennia later, we still debate what truly happened in those decisive hours. Was it miracle? Was it a natural event, interpreted religiously? Was it brilliant psychological strategy? We may never know all the answers, but the fall of Jericho in the 1200s BC continues to remind us that no structure is permanent, that cities flourish and disappear, that beliefs move peoples, that decisions made under absolute conviction can redraw entire geographies. The past is not merely a sequence of dates, it is a mirror. When we look at Jericho, we see a city secure behind its walls, confident in its stability. We also see a people driven by promise and faith, willing to cross deserts and confront fortifications, and we see how, in a matter of days, the world can change irreversibly. Perhaps the question is not only how Jericho fell, but how many Jerichos still believe their walls cannot be broken.
Understanding the past is the only way to recognize the signs before the walls begin to tremble again.